The Proceeds of Crime Act should be amended early next year. That assurance from Attorney General Adriel Brathwaite, who says by that time, Barbados should have a civil asset forfeiture regime in place. He was speaking at the opening of a Proceeds of Crime symposium facilitated by the British High Commission at the Supreme Court complex today. Mr. Brathwaite says training of key stakeholders like the police, customs and immigration has started and will go a long way in strengthening the law.
The whole issue, for example, is after you have seized an asset, what are your rights and what are your responsibilities with respect to this asset? In a small jurisdiction like ours, if you have a house of a known drug baron, who's going to purchase this house, who's going to be willing to purchase the house? What are our responsibility as a state in terms of, do we continue to insure it, do we continue to maintain it? There are challenges. If you have a vessel, where do you store it? How do you store it? How quickly can you dispose of it? Given the fact that you might have challenges at the Supreme Court level or even to the Caribbean Court of Justice.
High Court Judge His Lordship Mario Michel says while countries of the OECS have enacted legislation to confiscate the proceeds of crime, it's not being enforced.
It is our hope, therefore, that this symposium will catalyze the enforcement in these territories of the laws on criminal asset recovery, leading to the confiscation by the state of the proceeds of crime, especially crimes involving the trafficking of illicit drugs and the laundering of money derived from these unrelated crimes.
The National Organization of Women wants the Commissioner of Police to initiate an immediate internal investigation into 2 reported cases of violence against women in Barbados. The cases involve Shanette Williams, who complained via the media yesterday regarding issues of violence she was facing, as well as the recent death of Linda Tull, who died on November 15th. There are suggestions that in both cases, some complaints were made to the police. President of NOW, Marilyn Rice-Bowen, wants police to be more sensitive and proactive in preventing acts of violence against women. She told CBC News NOW will not stand idly by and allow this alleged approach from the force to be business as usual.
Women of this country must be protected. If not the Royal Barbados Police Force, who else can they turn to? Where shortcomings are unearthed, we law enforcement investigations and responses are concerned, these should be met with the appropriate disciplinary response. We will await word. Whereas we value the partnership between the Royal Barbados Police Force and the National Organization of Women, we will not allow this partnership to cloud our vision, nor muzzle us as it relates to women's safety and protection.
CBC News contacted officials from the Police Public Relations Department. However, no comment was available at that time. Hundreds of Barbadians struggling to meet the daily commitments of their families are now turning to the church for financial assistance. That's the word from church leaders who've put the blame squarely on tough economic times. Shane Seeley has the story.
Hundreds and hundreds more Barbadians are coming to church, and not just for the word of God. We're hearing that many of them are in desperate need of financial assistance to pay bills and put food on their families' tables. Today, 4 church leaders gave the media first-hand accounts of the situation that they're seeing facing many Barbadian families in these tough economic times. While not being able to give any firm figures, all of these church leaders agree that the increase is significant.
Because in this time of recession, yes, some people have lost their jobs, some people, their bills are a bit higher. So yes, we are seeing people coming more.
Reverend Durant revealed Restoration Ministries is now spending more money than ever before on outfitting students. He says some parents simply can't afford to send their children to school.
There are about 20 children around the Burdenshill community. I was told that just 4 days ago, that are not going to school. And I asked them to give the addresses, get the names and addresses to me, because me and the church, we're going to go out there and find them and find out why they're not going to school. And whatever way we can help to get them to school, we are going to just make the sacrifice.
And the stories continue.
I have folk coming here every day for food, and we prepare food right now for 100 and something people. They come every single month for a bag of groceries. And I mean, I've had so many requests in the past weeks, unreal. And people that you wouldn't even think are suffering.
We were forced to create a department along within the church called the Ministry of Care, just to take care of the needs that have increased so significantly. Before, you would just have one or two individuals that would look after the needs of the people in the church. But we have to now pay the doctor's bills. In many cases, we have a doctor, we just honored her last 2 Sundays ago, honored her because sometimes we send the people to her and she's just charged us, a minimum. At the end of the month, she would tell us what the bill is. And so we are now paying people's doctor's bills.
Reverend Paul Watson of Messiah's House in St. John believes the current situation is a test of the church's resilience.
The church is prepared for that, because if the economy and the country is going through a bit of bother, somebody has to take up the slack, and all cannot be taken up by government social services.
Now, despite the heavy financial burden that this situation is placing on the church leaders are saying they will not leave the people of Barbados. In fact, they are pledging even more assistance in the months ahead. Shane Seeley, CBC News.
And Barbadians are being encouraged to observe a pre-independence National Day of Prayer on Thursday. It's the church's response to recent violence and the current recession. Church leaders want government, business owners and schools to allow Barbadians to take time out of their day-to-day activities to come into the church and pray for better days ahead. Senator Reverend Dr. David Joint of Restoration Ministries is concerned that many people are living in fear, and he views this as a way to restore confidence in Barbadian society.
The idea of this National Prayer initiative is also to rebuild confidence. We want to rebuild national confidence. Since the whole spirit of fear seems to be gripping many lives, people are uncertain about their future. People are fearful they're not going to make it. Some are wondering what is going to happen tomorrow, and a lot of negativism is permeating the atmosphere. We want to release something positive again in the air. There is hope in God.
Reverend Dr. Lucille Baird of Mount Zion Mission says it's time for the church to step up and address issues like domestic violence in a serious way.
We are seeing a significant increase in violence in Barbados, especially in the area of domestic violence, resulting in murders. And people are crying out and they're saying that the police are not responding fast enough and things like that. While the police are expected to really act and to do their job, the church must also do her job. And the church's job is intervention through intercession and prayer.
Government has signed on to a $7 million project which will bring flooding relief and water harvesting measures to the western part of the island. This was recently revealed by Environment and Drainage Minister Dr. Dennis Flo at the signing ceremony at his ministry. The United States Agency for International Development is facilitating the project. Dr. Lowe indicated that the monies will come through cash inputs, in-kind contributions, and direct grants. He says his ministry is currently challenged with drainage issues, particularly in the St. James area.
Barbados remains committed to ensuring that the necessary infrastructure is in place to protect our inland, coastal, and marine ecosystems from flooding events. This will coincide with the work already undertaken by the Coastal Zone Management Unit and the Drainage Division on the west coast of the island. The intensity and frequency of rainfall this year, particularly during the hurricane season, have taken a toll on our drainage system.
And U.S. Ambassador Dr. Larry Palmer says his government remains committed to assisting countries in the region impacted by extreme weather events.
Without urgent strategic action, climate change issues impacting Barbados, including the availability of fresh water and the impact on coastal areas resulting from higher sea levels, are expected to worsen. Public investments and donor funding will not be enough, will not be sufficient to address these needs. The business community, including commercial businesses, hotels, restaurants, as well as robust involvement from local communities, will be required to protect Barbados' valuable natural resources and assets.
The Ministry of Finance says the 15% tax on lottery winnings over $100,000 announced in this year's budget will be fully implemented. However, it will be done with some changes following the passage of the appropriate legislation. The clarification comes against the background of a recent newspaper report in which an operator of the Barbados lotteries was quoted as saying that he'd received correspondence from the ministry indicating that it would no longer be implemented. In a statement issued today, the ministry revealed that following the budget presentation, some industry players wrote to ask for the proposal to be re-examined, citing some challenges. After examining those concerns, the ministry found some to be valid. It formally indicated to at least one major player that it had decided not to pursue the measure in its original form. The ministry also took the decision that it would make necessary adjustments to the original proposal, allowing it to achieve the objectives which it set. They will then be resubmitted to Parliament following Cabinet approval. The ministry added that it's therefore putting the finishing touches to the proposal, following which industry players will be informed. It's expected that this process will be completed in a few weeks. 7 people are now out of work following the closure of the Club Caribbean Lounge at the Grantley Adams International Airport, and it's going to cost government $1.7 million to wrap up the operations there. Dale Ford has the details as she takes us inside Parliament today. Dale?
Tourism Minister Richard Seeley told the House that the landside facility, which fell under the Caribbean International Airways Limited, was facing stiff competition from the Airside Lounge, which was opened by the Airlines Association of Barbados in 2007. He says the Club Caribbean Lounge was poorly located and remained uncompetitive. He further noted that the lounge is behind in rent as well. The minister was speaking during debate for a supplemental of $1,743,683 from the Consolidated Fund.
For severance purposes, $217,606.59 are needed. And I mention that up front because those are really the urgent funds that are needed, because clearly, you know, having already been severed because operations ceased, I think September 30th. We would certainly want the people to have their severance in their hands, well, by Christmas. We wouldn't want this thing to linger around. It wasn't budgeted for. So that portion is urgent.
Meanwhile, Tourism Shadow Minister Santia Bradshaw says government should have moved more quickly to stem the decline at the lounge, which she says started as far back as 2009.
The Club Caribbean Lounge was in fact losing money as a result of the policy decision that had been taken, and therefore active steps needed to have been taken far earlier. Now, that may be water under the bridge, and we're now at a position where we're paying out $1.7 million. Because obviously, since 2008, additional rental income would have been owed to the government of Barbados. And therefore, in a climate certainly where job losses are an issue, it would no doubt have been easier for persons to have been reintegrated into the employment environment back in 2008 or 2009.
Opposition leader Mia Mottley says the Barbados Labour Party is willing to sit with government and assist with the removal of what she calls blockages in the government system that are preventing key activities from happening. She pointed to a delay in the classification of the airport as Category 1 status as one area which needs immediate attention.
If as part of the Category 1 remit, the Joint Committee can also look at how do we position Barbados to be the major hub other than Miami and Panama in this hemispheric basin. That is something that we are prepared to give up time for, to come to work every week, every other week, because it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to make an immediate difference to the foreign exchange earnings of Barbados in the next 12 months, but it will in 3 to 5 years.
Meanwhile, St. Lucie MP Dennis Kalman says the Grantley Adams International Airport is one of the most outstanding airports regionally and internationally, and he suggests this will not change with the construction of a new airport in St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
And to assume that when the airport is built in St. Vincent, that it might be a negative for Barbados, that can only occur if we allow the airport to be completed and we do not do the marketing that is needed to ensure now that we use those seats that would normally be in transit to be those for our passengers.
The House resumes next Tuesday. Michelle?
Thanks very much, Dale. Business people have been asked to reconsider moving their businesses from Bridgetown. This from Everett Eastman, Operations Director of NSR Limited, the core operators of Sky Mall at Bridge Street and Haggett Hall. Mr. Eastman says there's a view that commerce in Bridgetown is quickly dying. However, he's calling on government and the private sector to work together to prevent this from happening. He made the comment at the Bridge Street Mall during the launch of the Urban Development Commission's Culturama.
We need to consider moving to places where we serve the people that need services. So we were happy to forward this motion for both the RDC and the UBC to have a presence smack in Bridgetown, a place that is dying because people are leaving. So the notion is to bring people back to Bridgetown.
Mr. Eastman says NSR Limited and by extension Williams Industries will continue to do their part.
I think the first thing we need to do is to look at how accessible and convenient it is to the people who are coming to town. And we try to do as much as we can in providing a car park. It costs us close to $300,000 to make sure that it was a convenient location. And as well as you can see, we just did some greenery here by the wharf side. So we are pleased at all times to bring our properties to a level that is aesthetically pleasing to the people that we serve.
A clear picture is being presented on how government will be using PPPs or private-public partnerships to stimulate economic growth and cut spending. Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Economic Affairs, Senator Jepta Ince, unveiled some of these plans during the opening of a major Caribbean PPP forum at the Barbados Hilton. It was attended by top officials from the Inter-American Development Bank, the World Bank, and the Caribbean Development Bank, among others. Senator Ince acknowledged the contribution of those agencies, noting that PPPs form a major part of government's medium-term strategy.
Outlined in the Government of Barbados Medium-Term Growth and Development Strategy 2013-2020, the government will facilitate greater use of PPP arrangements in financing capital projects where government will make savings in expenditure or earn additional revenue to cover the lease payments on such arrangements. While PPPs can significantly contribute to the substantial growth within Caribbean countries, it should also be developed in the context of protecting important assets against climate change risks and reduce carbon footprints.
Senator Ince is meanwhile confident the strategy will help improve economic growth to about 3% by 2017 and by up to 5% by 2020.
To achieve this, the government will focus on a number of priority areas over the medium term: international business and financial services, renewable energy, industry, supported by small and medium-sized enterprises that have key roles to play in this growth thrust.
More middle-income housing solutions slated for St. James will soon be available. MP for St. James South, Donville Innes, says he'll be meeting with officials from the National Housing Corporation and contractors this week to get an update on the construction work being done in the West Terrace Durance District. He says after that he'll be able to give a more definitive timeline for completion of the project. Mr. Innes was speaking at a branch meeting for his constituency over the weekend.
The housing project at West Terrace Durance is moving ahead. I was over there earlier last week. The one behind 16th Avenue, and the model house is nearing completion. The team the contractors have resumed work full steam, and I believe they're working on about 12 houses as we speak. And that development, when completed, will provide 72 middle-income houses, housing solutions to Barbadians.
A severe lack of funding is threatening to bring down the curtain on the budding film industry, an industry which, according to the creator of the hugely popular Keeping Up with the Joneses, has the potential to remedy the lack of local programming on television. Ramel Hall was speaking at the premiere of Keeping Up with the Joneses, the movie, at Frank Cullimore Hall on Sunday night.
I would hazard that there were probably about 100 pilots of series and game shows sitting down in DVDs on people's shelves right now, all over the island. We have enough shows that had a one episode produced, or half of a one episode produced, that we could literally flood CBC with content. And I mean good content too, you know. I don't mean nothing cheap, you know. I have seen some pilots that look so international and good, but guess what? Lack of funding. Can't happen.
Mr. Hall says the movie was almost derailed by a lack of funding, but it was saved by last-minute cash injections from Atlantis Submarines and Signia Financial. He says the requirements to access the current funding provided for the arts are not being applied properly.
You know, we keep hearing talk about pushing culture forward, but if you really want to push culture forward, when people go to apply for a grant, people that have reputation, the rug should not be pulled from under them. These things should not be allowed to happen. So you're saying one thing, but then you're doing something else. And then you want to talk about pushing culture. These things cannot happen.